Welcome to Musing, music, conversation, and inspiration for the adventurous listener here on CJSW 90.9 FM in Calgary. My name is Janna Sailor, and it is my pleasure to be your guide on this deep dive into contemporary Canadian music. Right now we are listening to Leaven by Luis Ramirez, my guest on today's show. We'll hear from the composer himself shortly, but right now let's take a listen. Today on Musing, I am delighted to welcome composer, pianist, conductor, and scholar Luis Ramirez to the show. Luis is a Mexican-Canadian composer renowned for his vibrant and distinct writing and evocative soundscapes that incorporate Mexican folklore with cinematic storytelling, creating his own unique compositional voice. Luis, welcome to Musing.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really happy to chat with you.
I'm so delighted to have you on the show. My very first encounter with your work was as a violinist, actually, playing in the orchestra. In my previous life, I played violin full time, and on occasion, I have the privilege of stepping in and playing alongside the amazing musicians of the Calgary Philharmonic. But a hands-on experience of new music is always my favorite. And we were performing your work, Chido. I found it really fascinating because we played it through in rehearsal the first day, and then the second day you came in and talked to us about the piece, gave us some insight. But it was like the writing spoke for itself, and it was so clear from the page and the story just within the notes, the printed page, that the narrative, the gestures, they were so clear that your affirmation just affirmed what I'd already experienced in playing your work. And so I thought that was a really extraordinary feature that your music carried. So how you have an extraordinary ability to make ideas jump off the page and into real life. And so how do you do that?
Well, that's really kind of you. I really appreciate it. What I love about this piece is that in a way it's really raw, as in I was really new to orchestral writing. Well, not really new. I was literally new. This is my first orchestral piece ever.
Oh, wow.
So it was very much, I think, a product of not knowing the rules, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really liberating, because it was just a piece that I originally wrote as like my final composition for my master's, and I never intended it for it to be performed, or never expected, rather. And so I think because of that, I went into it with just a very clear sense of I want to portray a story, and I am fully just in storytelling mode, and I think a lot of what came out is to do with the liberties that I had. I've been very fortunate that the two composition teachers that I've had have been not at all in any way sort of imposing or indoctrinating. They've just let me do what I want to do and guide me through it. So in a way, I think that is what led to this piece feeling fresh, in my opinion. Which is that I didn't really have any preconceptions about it, or any specific aims for it. Of course, I had done score study, and of course I've studied, the big works and all my influences that certainly play a role. But I think the particular power of this piece is that it came from a place of genuine naivete. I was really just playing with the instrument and seeing what I could do for storytelling with the orchestra. So I think that's the sort of conception of this work.
And so much of your work has like a programmatic element to it. Is your inspiration like autobiographical? Is it fictional? Where do you get the inspiration for your pieces?
For this piece in particular, there's nothing really like mysterious, or there's not like a secret, or I'm not trying to make it about any particular person. The story for those that want to know is simply a story of this person that was incredibly cool and interesting and amazing, and all those words are encapsulated by the Spanish word chido, which is a very slang Mexican word. And to me, it was just, this is a person that thinks that they are amazing, and as they're walking down the street, everybody's looking at them, and there's so much swagger and cool vibes, and as the piece progresses, it simply transforms into the fact that it was just a dream. The change of the story is that at the end he wakes up, and to me it was just a very sort of simple story. There's not really much profound depth to it, but I do like the fact that it has a programmatic element. I think what I found resonates with me the most in music making is storytelling, and it is something that I've explored in many of my works, and I think that for me it's a way to find a connecting node between the composer, the musicians on stage, and the audience that allows them to project their own experiences into the music. And that's why I like to use storytelling for that purpose.
So I would never have known that this was your very first composition for orchestra. What was that like to hear it realized for the first time?
Oh, it was amazing, I mean, the story of it is it's pretty cool, because I finished my first draft of it, and I submitted it for the Composers Institute with the Winnipeg Symphony New Music Festival that had just started occurring, and this is a week of workshops and behind the scenes into the orchestra. And so I was able to get a reading with not with the Winnipeg Symphony, but with the Manitoba University Orchestra. And we had a reading session. It was incredibly insightful, and it was amazing feedback, as a composer, that's one of the best things you can ask for, is to have a live rendition of your music. And so it was incredibly insightful, and it revealed that I needed to work on it a lot more, but it was a good effort, first effort. And so my composition teacher, Patrick Carver, he encouraged me to next year improve that same piece, but to submit it to the Canadian Music Centre Emerging Composers Competition for the Prairie region. Mm-hmm. And that's when I submitted my piece as a new, fully improved version. And that's how I got the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra to perform that piece as a winner of that competition. So to me, it was such a high honor to even just get chosen, let alone to get a recording. So I think that for me that was one of the most consequential things, because we're interacting with a professional orchestra by itself is incredibly valuable, but getting to know all the behind the scenes, getting to know the culture, getting to know protocols. And then once I went through that and I got the recording, I had something to show for my work. And that's when I started sending that recording to competitions. And that's how I started getting to apply to calls for scores. And I think that's precisely what launched my orchestral career, I would say. I think that's what led me to getting a commission by the Toronto Symphony, and then being composer fellow of the Hamilton Philharmonic, and then being performed by other orchestras around Canada. So it really holds a lot of weight, this piece for me, because I think I owe a lot of my career to this composition.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that, the Canadian Music Centre Emerging Composer Competition. I'm so excited to be handing out this award to Nick Bray, actually, in a couple of weeks on January 25th as part of the Winnipeg New Music Festival. And thank you so much for highlighting, the opportunities that it opened up for you as a young composer.
Yeah, absolutely. It was incredibly monumental for me, and what's so amazing to me is that so many of the previous winners of that same award are all composers that I really admire and look up to. So just the fact that that I was part of that list meant a lot, and then seeing more people that I know being selected afterwards, like Nick, as you mentioned, I know, or Greg before him, and so it's really cool to just see that it's now affecting more, or being so impactful for new composers. So I only hope that it's as impactful to them as it has been for me.
Tell me about your upcoming commissions and opportunities. You mentioned the Toronto Symphony. What do you think they're looking for, and why do they choose you as a compositional voice that they want to see expressed?
I think I was a bit concerned when starting to compose. It's the livelihood of being a composer, the difficulty in having a freelance career and just composing. So for me, that was never a plan. I never expected that to happen. And so it was not only until last year that I, for the first time, saw a possibility of actually seeing the light of, I could actually just be a freelance composer if I dedicate myself just to it. So I think it's been a really unpredictable path, and ultimately what I learned is that I just have to keep working. I don't think it's been as important to me to focus on accolades or and trying to win competitions. I think the work has been coming to me, which I think it's incredibly fortunate. I think people that have come to me for commissions have mostly been people that have known me throughout my life as a musician, former colleagues or people that I had interactions during summer festivals, and it's really rewarding to see that it's a community of support, of performers and conductors and orchestras, just kind of looking after the local composers and creators. So I think I've been very fortunate that's been happening to me, and I think maybe that's what people see in my works, is that that I'm dedicated to being part of that community. I think for me it's really important to to engage with musicians that have that much care for the music as much as I do, you know, for the performance of it, for the construction of it, for the craft that it takes, and that and there's a lot of very mutual respect and admiration from the from me to the performers and vice versa. So I think I've been very fortunate about that, and that has led me to some incredible opportunities. You know, I think the biggest ones that stand out have been 2 commissions by the Toronto Symphony, and I think that started as like very, very serendipitous encounter of them with my music. And I honestly, I still don't know the origin. It might have been just a very that, you know, that someone told them about me, or that they saw my music in one of their applications. But regardless, I got a call, and I was invited to write a 3-minute piece, Mi Piñata. And they really liked it, so you know they invited me to write another one for 5 minutes, and this was Picante, and now this orchestral works have been incredibly rewarding, because they've allowed me to get more performances and to kind of keep expanding my output. And I think the musicians can see the work and the care that I put into the music, and I think that's reflected in them being selected by other major orchestras. You know, the San Francisco Symphony, the National Symphony of Mexico. I think so much of that is in the work that I like to put in the music, and the connections that I like to make with the people putting these programs together. So I think there's a lot of this aspect of community that it's very important to me.
Yeah. One of my musical heroes is David Pei, who's the artistic director of Music on Main in Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the privilege of attending one of his talks that he did a number of years ago. And one thing that I have taken with me from that experience was he talked about the silent hands that propel your career along, that maybe, you know, get you that very first break or that very first gig. And you just never know what those silent hands are always working for you to propel you forward. And you don't really necessarily always know exactly where those opportunities come from, but you just know that each opportunity builds on the next. And, you know, each job, each gig that you do and you put your best foot forward will have that momentum, and you know, people will notice that either for good or bad, and obviously in your case for the positive, and you know, propel you along if you're doing the great work, and you know, the embodied work that you are doing, and you know, that will result in life-changing, career-changing opportunities.
Yeah, I love that, and I love that you mentioned David Pei, because you know, I just want to add to this aspect of community and connection, because David is connected to this. So you know, when I was doing my studies in Brandon University, I was involved with many things, trying to engage with musicians by being backstage assistant for the concerts or an accompanist for performers. And so on one of those occasions, I was a page turner for the EGRE competition that happens every year. And I got to meet two lovely performers, Sarah Jo Kirsch and Madeline Hildebrand.
Oh, wonderful.
And, we became really good friends. And then we were in Italy together. We did a summer festival there. And then we, stayed in touch. We saw each other, every now and then. And so we just became friends, but now they're also amazing artists and performers on their own right. And, they're working together. And so they asked me to write a piece. And so I wrote a piece for them for Music on Main. And that was premiered in February of last year.
How cool.
And that was amazing.
Yes, I remember seeing that.
Oh, cool. Yeah. And so, and then, I was not expecting anything from it, but because you mentioned David Pei, he reached out just to express how much he liked my work, and he asked if he could submit it as a nomination for an international competition, and so it just comes to show how the music community is kind of looking to help each other many times, and when you just don't know when one thing will lead to another, and I think that's one of the main things that I've learned in hindsight, is that kindness and that support, I think, will inevitably just lead to good experiences and really great relationships in the future.
I love that. That's beautiful. And likewise, Dave has been instrumental in opening a lot of doors for me and offering me some incredible opportunities. So shout out to you, Dave.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great.
As a Mexican Canadian composer, you have a very unique perspective and compositional voice. So how does your life experience and maybe your culture that you were raised in impact you as an artist and in your day-to-day interactions with art?
That's another answer to why I think people want to commission my works. I think they appreciate the way that I involve my cultural heritage in my music, and I think that's been very important for me. I think that's been an interesting journey, because to me it all started just from wanting to tell stories from my upbringing. I spent my first 20 years of my life in Mexico before I moved to Canada, so obviously I very much grew up exclusively there. But I think when I moved to Canada, it was a huge revelation to see my country from the outside. And I think that's something that has happened to many of my friends and colleagues that do the same, when they leave the country. And one of those things is just to see the contrast, I think the peculiarities, the idiosyncrasies of being a Mexican, and the way it's portrayed outside of it. And for me, I guess I just took it as a responsibility to show and to represent my culture. I think that became an important factor for me in just showcasing the aspects of my culture that I love. And what I've enjoyed about doing this as a composer is that it's allowed me to do it in a really unique way. I don't think I think that's what people appreciate, because typically when one talks about Mexican music or Mexican compositions in that classical context, it's typically done in a very nationalistic and repetitive way that has been done for many years.
And almost a caricature sometimes.
Very caricature, yeah, exactly. Just very reductive as well. And so to me, I think it was making my music include this narratives and topics. I think it was a sort of challenge to that, and to be able to explore topics that interested me, and topics that were equally folkloric in my eyes, and that I knew people would relate to, but that maybe were not topics that were typically discussed or present at all in this classical setting. I think as classical performers, we both know that there's always been this association with classical music of elitism and being very exclusive,
yes,
or pretentious, and I think that's been part of the culture that I am not particularly fond of. So I think it was a big philosophical sort of pursuit for me to write pieces that did not perpetuate that, but rather that would be more about topics of the people, of the culture, of the common person. And my very, very, I think the most important way I did that was with my first Toronto Symphony Commission, because it was incredible pressure to do something that maybe was up to the expectations. I mean, I'm getting this opportunity to write for one of the best orchestras in Canada. I mean, there's an immense pressure to sort of succumb to elegant topic or whatever, and I was conflicted, and I was, I struggled with it for a while, but I decided, no, you know what, I'm just going to write about the piñata and I'm just going to write about something that is culturally meaningful to me. And I think it's a really interesting format for a piece. There is a whole culture around constructing something, building something whose ultimate purpose is just to be destroyed.
Right.
So I think just that idea was enough for me to, in 3 minutes, gradually assemble and craft this musical work. And in the last minute, it just gets destroyed and completely distorted, and it was a really fun experiment. But it was very successful. I think it more than anything, the lesson that I got is that I really should just strive to do what I want to do, and to be more centered around who I want to be as a composer, and to be true to my own taste and desires.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And I love that image of creating something just to destroy it. I mean, that in a way, that's kind of a metaphor for music. In a way, like we create it in the moment and then it's gone. It's not destroyed, but it's it's there and then it isn't. And it's something that an exercise in presence. Both in a piñata and a live performance.
Yeah, exactly. Ephemerally beautiful.
So, what have been some of your greatest obstacles or challenges or situations or mindsets that you've had to overcome that you've encountered in your creative life?
I think, the most obvious one is the financial situation. I think coming to Canada as an immigrant meant that for most of the time I was constantly in the back of my head expecting to go back anytime.
I see.
And for this year to be my last year in Canada, so it was a very important factor, and at the same time it was the drive to work and to try to make a career out of music. I think my initial arrival to Canada was as a pianist, and piano has been my main focus for most of my life. But I ultimately learned that I needed to adapt and to expand beyond just that, and more than anything, I was curious to learn more about music composition and ultimately become more of a complete musician. And the reality is that there's not a lot of incentives for people to support that. I think that's a very difficult path for any artist, not just a performer or a classical musician. I think for many artists, the biggest thing is for people to find value in what they do. And I think for me, the scariest thing has been that my favorite outlet, which is the symphony orchestra, has shown to have very serious moments of disappearing.
Yeah.
We've seen it with several orchestras across Canada. There's the orchestras are an endangered species. So I think that to me makes me wonder a lot more about what's the value that an orchestra can have in a society, and what can my role as a composer be. So I think that aspect of engaging with the community and writing music that resonates, or that at least makes some people feel represented and seen, is my way to help with that. But that's a big uncertainty. I don't know how it will look in the future. So I think that aspect of not knowing if I'll be able to financially sustain myself as a musician is a big it's a big obstacle. I think ultimately my hope is that for as long as we keep helping each other, and as a musical community, I hope that there's people that are going to have the care for what we do, and there's going to be a surge in the value of engaging with live musicians. I could go more into this, but I think as more artificially generated content starts to take over with the increase of AI, I think, or at least my optimistic view, is that there's going to be an increased value in human performance, in human content, in human connection. So my hope is that is a bit of a boost to live performance, to really highlight the meaning of being a human, of having those experiences as a society. So yeah, I'm optimistic. We'll see how it goes.
Artisanal music that's handcrafted.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I feel similarly. So what has your response been when you've had your music performed, say, for members of your own Mexican or Hispanic community? What has the response been to your music?
I think it's usually been really positive. I think they get excited. I remember the explicitly the concert that you mentioned, that you played my piece with the Calgary Philharmonic. There were 5 Mexican people that said hi to me after the concert, that just came to the concert because they saw that word Chido in the program, and they were like, what is this? This they've never seen something like that, Chido is a kind of slang that's more attributed to urban speak and that kind of young communication. So to see that printed on a pamphlet that's usually associated with very prestigious and elegance and all the associations with classical music, I think that was what caused them to come, and they were really happy to hear it. I think ultimately they appreciate that I'm doing this and kind of showcasing the culture. And so it's been moments like that really resonate with me, or like when the Toronto Symphony Orchestra with the Piñata piece, it was really cool because the orchestra chose to perform that piece in their open house later in the fall after the premiere. And this is a free concert that's open to families, and seeing so many kids in the audience being bobbing their head to the music and being so excited about the music. It was really moving just to see that there's this enjoyment in my music. And I think I had a very profound moment in that day, because I was having an identity moment when I'm being programmed next to other works that I really look up to, or that are incredibly moving or very profound or very serious topics. And I'm like, what am I doing here talking about a piñata, But I think I had this moment where I'm like, wait, but this kids are enjoying it. It seems to bring joy. And I think it was that moment of realizing that my music was a reflection of myself, of this sort of positive energy and trying to bring an optimistic look to things. So yeah, I think it was a really special moment just to see that by reflecting on my own culture, others can see themselves reflected, and that it can bring some joy in people's lives.
And that, saying that, when you're authentically yourself, you allow other people to fully embrace who they are as well. I love watching kids at concerts because they don't have all the filters that, so-called cultured adults have, and they just are like sponges, and they can take it in, and they can truly hear the music and the humanity and the essence of it, I think. I want to circle back just for a moment to those members of the Mexican community that attended your concert, just because they recognized a word and just how powerful that is, and how important representation on our stages, how powerful that is, and how necessary it is. And when we see someone that looks and speaks and comes from a similar background to us, how that just is another way of connecting, not only just through music, but through cultural identity and language. That's really so profound.
Yeah, I love that. I love that depth, that it can have.
Yeah, so many layers that connect us if we look for those connections. So you've touched on a few of these things. Were there definitive moments in your career that really set you on your path, that perhaps you didn't realize it at the time, but you look back and say, that truly made me the artist that I am now, or that closed a door and I was definitely not going that direction? I'm really interested to hear kind of more in depth of your career path.
Yeah, for sure. I think I can mention two moments. I think the first one that comes to mind is on my last year in Brandon, Manitoba. I was done my studies, and I was able to be the conductor for the Brandon Community Orchestra, and that was incredibly moving. That was so invigorating because it was very raw. It was really, people are there because they want to be there. People are there because they want to make music.
Yeah.
There were none of these sort of usual conflicts that one might encounter in orchestras with egos or competition and all that. It's very pure music making, and that was really special because it really showed me the power of music, and it led me to see how important that was for me personally, and that I could be in a leadership position to assist with that, and I really enjoyed it. I think I grew up always wanting to, always loving orchestral music, but every orchestral conductor that I saw was late in their 60s or 70s, so
Yes,
I
yeah.
just always thought that's something for someone old to do. you know so it was really special to be able to do that at such an early stage in my life, and that's something that I do want to visit in the future. I think ultimately being a pianist and a composer and a conductor is like a good goal for me to feel like I've accomplished what I like the most.
You'd be a triple threat.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and at least to start with. Maybe after that I'll find something more. But yeah, I think I'm very driven with curiosity, and I think those three things have been the ones that give me the most rewarding experiences. And then the second one was that when I moved to Toronto for my doctoral studies, I did not expect at all any performance opportunities, but just by serendipity through a Facebook post, I ended up joining a tango band. I ended up being a lot more active in performance as I was doing my studies in composition. It ended up growing into a fully fledged tango quintet that with whom I used to play at bars like twice a month, and we would have the opportunity to play really, really cool music from contemporary Argentinian composers. And I would get to work with those composers, and it developed in me this wonderful love for tango music, and it led me to write my own tangos and to workshop them with my band. And it was incredible. It was so rewarding to have that opportunity to play chamber music, but in a setting that to me was kind of like what I wanted to accomplish with the classical music that I love to perform, which is playing at a drum taberna at a bar for 2 hours, just a bunch of really gnarly contemporary chamber works.
Yeah.
It was awesome, and people liked it. I think because it's very accessible. It's like 3-minute, 4-minute pieces.
Right.
But I think I found this affinity to tango because it has the sort of craftsmanship and complexity that typically found in the classical world. I think it resonated with the same techniques that I learned as a composer, so it was really easy to connect with that. So that was a really wonderful experience to find love in a completely new genre that I had zero experience in.
Wow, and that sounds like a blast.
It was amazing, and honestly, I think it was a very important transition for me because it made me a better classical musician.
Yes. Yes.
Interestingly enough, just as soon as I stepped out of that of the classical world,
Yes.
it made me a better musician.
That's what I would always, I don't teach very much anymore, but when I did, I would always tell my students, play everything. Everything has something to teach you. As a violinist, like dive into fiddle, dive into gypsy jazz. Everything has something to teach you, and it will stretch you and make you listen differently and in different ways. And that all that, these were serious classical players, and in many cases that would kind of look at me sideways. I was like, no, this will improve your classical playing and give you like mad skills in so many ways. Wow, that's so. I love hearing that story and how you liken it to chamber music.
It's so important, to expand the horizons of a musician.
Yeah, and it's all music. It's all part of this wonderful playground that is literally at our fingertips.
Yeah.
So wonderful to talk to you today. Thank you so much for being my guest here on Musings, and all the best with all the amazing things that you have ahead. Just nothing but possibility and bright future for you as you embark on this next stage of your career, Luis.
Thank you so much, Janna. I really appreciate what you do in all of your endeavors. I know you're a very busy person, so I appreciate the time that you took to talk. I had a great conversation, so thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely. Just briefly, if people are looking for recordings of your music and to hear your music performed live in their community, what's coming up next, and where can we find you?
Yeah, so I have an exciting performance with the Edmonton Symphony Orchestra January 31st. They will be performing the piece we were talking about at the beginning, Chido. After that, I will have some more performances in August in Toronto and in November in Montreal. So if people are interested, they can check them out on my website and on my social media.
Wonderful. And we'll spread your socials far and wide, and so people can track you down.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of Musing on CJSW 90.9 FM in Calgary. My name is Janna Sailor, and it's been such a delight to share music and ideas on this platform. Musing is a production of the Canadian Music Centre Prairie Region and is produced on the traditional territories of the Treaty 7 nations, which include the Siksika, Kainai, Picante, Stoney Nakoda, Chiniki, Bearspaw, Goodstoney, and Tsuut'ina nations, and the Métis Nations 5 and 6. Thanks for listening. Till next time, and take care. I'll leave you with the music of Luis Ramirez. Here is Chido.